every day by shutting it out. So that's my take on dystopia.
Yeah. Bina, Ryan?
Go ahead. Dystopia is a very familiar milieu for those of us who live in Karachi. And I think that the conditions that we put up with here would be considered dystopian in many, many other parts of the world. So, and I was born in Karachi. I was raised in Karachi. And I always just took that to be normal life. When I was older and I knew better and I started reading the works of writers like George Orwell, then I suddenly realized, hang on, this isn't quite normal. It's not normal to grow up under a dictator. It's not normal to grow up with black laws and black days and things that you can't say on television or print them. It's not normal to have a protest be met with state force and violence, and it's not normal for people to die every day as they do in this country. So I think I was very much raised in a dystopian tradition and in a dystopian fashion. Perhaps that's why I'm drawn to writing about it now, although that hasn't been the focus of my work for most of my life. But in the last 10 years, I would say, this is where the needle has come to rest. And I find myself worryingly comfortable in this genre, worryingly comfortable. Of course, as world events become more and more dystopian, we do have to ask ourselves, are we still dystopian? Are we still speculating? Or is everything that we have talked about actually coming true now? Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult position to be in because you are somewhat of a visionary. But now I think we are almost, I would call us historians of the future.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, please.
That's going to be a hard one to follow. If we take utopia, the idea invented, popularized by Thomas More, the term utopia means no place. Mm-hmm. And I think if we take dystopia as the opposite of that, then it would be this place. And I just mirror everything that's been said, that the current world we're living in is a dystopia in a variety of ways. And hopefully us talking about it today might change some stuff.
Yeah. I'm so glad this is where we started, because I think that's also where I was leading to. Not just the world we're living in, but if you go back to some of the great dystopian works, the timeline is also meeting up in a way that is incredibly uncomfortable, that many of our dystopian works that were coming out of the last Great War or in the aftermath of it is predicting a future that they thought was so far away, but is the future that we currently live in right now. And I think if you engage with that kind of literature and you engage with like the historical amounts of that literature, like it's very difficult to not be like, oh, that started in 2025, like, which is last year. But I think this is the question, like, do we need a word called dystopia when the landscape is the topic? Like, this is our reality, right? And for those of us who are here from Karachi, I agree with what Bina is. We have been in this milieu for a long time, and now we're seeing it sort of happen globally. Yeah.
Sorry, what did you?
That we live here. I wanted to draw back to what you said, which is that we thought this was normal, and it took a while to realize, like, a pregnant mother falling into a sewer hole and dying, and then being covered up by the government is perhaps not normal, right? And now we're seeing in other places that may have been held up as not maybe utopias, but not dystopias, crashing into fascism and totalitarianism and dystopia. So do we need dystopian literature when we live in dystopia?
I think we still do, because it can be so, reality can be so amorphous until we look back, and it's only in hindsight that life can take shape. So, for instance, does anyone here do social media? Anyone do Instagram?
We know this, that is true.
No judgment, because...
Raise your hands. We know you guys are on social media.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are many good
Thank
things
you.
about it, we know, but it's also an anesthetic. It's designed to be an addictive drug, just like Soma in Brave New World, which is, you know, one of the best books, in my opinion, that I've read and still works. I mean, that's still a relevant dystopia where we are anesthetized by our own selection. We choose to keep pushing the button and zoning out of an unbearable, sometimes, reality. And of course, everyone understands why, but it also debilitates us as a society. So the terrible example you cited that I haven't heard about, it sounds like a Grimm's fairy tale. It's too easy to go past that to growing your own whatever. And so it's very like Aldous Huxley wrote. What year did he write Brave New World? Is it 1928?
28, 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a scant 100 years ago, we are now enacting by our own volition, we think, what was the core of a great dystopian novel. So, you know, it's in our pockets, it's in our hands.
Yes, we cannot say they didn't warn us. But I also feel like my job is being threatened because dystopia is basically what is happening in everyday journalism. Journalists are writing this stuff and everybody's like, truth is stranger than fiction, and I can't believe this is actually happening in the real world, and it's just so weird, it's just so weird. So I feel like this is an interesting inflection point in the dystopian world, in the dystopian literature world, because reality has caught up with our imaginations. It's actually now pretty much neck and neck. And I find it amazing that in A Brave New World, the drug Soma, which was, if you've read A Brave New World, it was the drug that everybody takes and they just feel happy all the time and they don't see the the horrible things going on around them. And I felt when I visited Denmark some years ago, I felt everybody's taking Soma here because
They're so happy.
well, this is 2012. I'm in Denmark, and everyone is so happy, and it's really utopia. And people have talked about the Scandinavian countries as if they are utopian, right? In the past, so liberal, so progressive, so tolerant. Everybody's happy. Social benefits are amazing. Scandinavia. Sorry, I'm very jet lagged. Scandinavia, it's really utopia, and if you can go there, you won't believe it. Now we fast forward to 2026, and Greenland is going to be invaded by the United States. And the Danes are crying, what did we do? We didn't do anything. Why are you doing this to us?
They colonized it, that's what they did.
They colonized Greenland, and not only that, but they have been going on a really hard right anti-immigration kick for the last 10 years. So dystopia and life in Europe, I would say, and especially in Denmark, is very dystopian for refugees. It's very dystopian for asylum seekers. It's very dystopian for immigrants. So I think the more important thing to realize is that within every society exists dystopia. I think that's the thing we haven't realized. The United States, when The Handmaid's Tale came out in the 80s, everyone was like, there's no way this can happen in America, and that's why it's so scary. And yet it was already happening to places, to women in different parts of the world. And it was already happening to people who were outsiders to that society. And now it's just in plain sight that, wow, yes, actually, what could have happened in The Handmaid's Tale is happening. So I think it's important for us to look at society and say, where is its dystopia? And we can't pretend anymore that there is no dystopia in any country, least of all Scandinavian countries.
Yeah. So I do think we still need the term and the concept of dystopian literature because, as has been said, a lot of what has happened has been predicted by the literature that came before. And if we can't push our imaginations forward to see what the next terrible thing is going to be, then we're powerless to fight it. But if we've still got authors who are creating dystopian works like Handmaid's Tale, which is a perfect example. Famously, Margaret Atwood said, "Everything I wrote is taken from real life. Every scenario, every quashing of women's rights was taken out of history, and so none of it was made up." And so, yeah, I think dystopian literature as a concept is still very valuable to us.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the same books that we are raised on as an educated society turn into such different meanings for different people. And particularly what I'm thinking about is Peter Thiel naming his surveillance company Palantir, which in The Lord of the Rings is the magic eye that the evil, the greatest in the world uses to monitor us, and that it's named that without irony, right? Or there's so many things you can pull that they're presented in literature. Like the point of these stories is to tell us these things are bad. And somewhere along the way, that message got lost.
We have crossed a tipping point where we no longer routinely think an excess of power is bad. We're used to it. And in fact, the more used to it we get, the more servile to it we become because it is normalized. And so I'm interested in perhaps exploring in this panel the role of freedom of speech and freedom of thought. And I think that the rise of this new technology, which I am certainly not saying is bad, it's a tool, the rise of this technology combined with the rise of the far right and the normalization of dictatorships has meant that we are encouraged to feel powerless. And it's easier if you can't beat them, join them, right? Because that is survival, which is something I find myself talking about a lot. So we get flooded, or perhaps this is just me, I get flooded by the news, by social media, by trying to be an engaged person and keep my humanity and care about other people. And then it all gets too much, and then I scroll, or I switch off. And then when I do go back to a reputable news source, and I live in London, and there are increasingly less reputable news sources, I don't know who to trust. And so I either have to do a lot more work personally to dig and find and put myself out there, or I have to become apathetic, which I refuse to do. But on occasion I am apathetic, and I do sit there for too long scrolling. So I go through a pretty regular cycle of inner dystopia myself. And I don't know what to do about it. So being at this festival is definitely something to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, you were nodding. I didn't know if you wanted to add something there.
Yeah, I think so. Talking about First Amendment or freedom of speech, one of the things that, again, I come at this more as a teacher of literature than a writer of dystopian literature. But one of the things I really enjoy about teaching dystopian literature is it facilitates conversations that otherwise you wouldn't be able to have because of laws about what you can say and what you can't say. I taught in Pakistan for a little while, so I'm familiar with those. But to be safe, I'm going to talk about Morocco, where I teach now, where there are numerous red lines or things that you are not allowed to talk about. The most important one is the royal family. Now, you can't talk about the royal family in Morocco, but if you teach a book like Alif the Unseen by G. Willow Wilson, which is set in an unnamed Arab country, you can have those conversations without getting yourself or your students in trouble. And so again, I think that's another very valuable use of dystopian fiction.
Which is a tactic you use, Bina, in Before She Sleeps, and the creation of the countries that you talk about in those two novels.
Yes, although like Laline, I'm actually working on, I've been working on a new novel since last summer. And I've just stopped, and I'm actually, because I'm too overwhelmed by what's happening all around us, and I can't seem to, and it's very rare that you'll hear somebody admit that they're so stuck with their book that they actually just feel like giving up at the moment. And that's
I love you for saying that.
That's where I am right
I'm
today.
there with you as well.
I've left it, and I haven't written anything for like 2 months, and I'm feeling so angry with myself. But I'm just too overwhelmed with what's going on. What I will say that is positive is that I find in my writing, and I'm seeing it also in Pakistani novels of different sorts, not just dystopia, I'm seeing that people are becoming braver and braver with what they can say. I'm seeing people write more about topics that were considered taboo. I'm seeing people taking chances, and and I think that the master of the taking of chances in Pakistani literature is going to be launching his new book in the next session. That's Muhammad Hanif with the Rebel English Academy. Nobody has pushed the red lines like Hanif. Be it, talking about what's happening in Balochistan with disappeared people, be it talking about whatever's happening in, the corridors of power, be it talking about the army itself. He has really opened doors for everybody to become a little bit braver. Of course, he also moved to London since then, so that may have something to do with it. But I see I see women writing more about sexuality. I see people writing more about egregious abuses in society. I read a fantastic novel, Where the Fireflies Dance by Aisha Hassan, about bonded labor. Things that were whispered about, things that were not meant to be spoken, are now being spoken. And that is the optimism of dystopia, is the resistance. The resistance to all of these things happening when you protest, and people are protesting. People are going out on streets and protesting. When you write, when you shine light on dark corners through social media. In universities, I'm seeing a blossoming of students who in previous generations would have never wanted to speak. They wouldn't have thought they had anything to say. They wouldn't have thought anyone was interested in their opinions. But we're on the forefront also, I think, of a big revolution in liberal arts education in Pakistan. For the last 10 years, we've been making a huge push towards opening people's minds towards the humanities. Christie is at Habib University doing that. Ryan was also at Habib previously before Morocco.
Bina's at Aga Khan.
I have just started teaching at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Aga Khan University. And I'm talking to my students about dystopia, but not necessarily in a literary way, but just in terms of what's happening around you. Look at what ChatGPT is doing to you. Look at what social algorithm media is doing to you. Social media algorithms. These are our dystopias today. The online world and the blurring of, the reality and the cybernetic world, so to speak. So this is a new dystopia for us to contend with. So perhaps I won't be out of a job just yet.
You definitely won't. And please take the rest you need.
Karachi air is not very good for you. No, I've got water. Thank you so much.
I have just remembered something listening to Bina, that there is the psychological dystopia, the political one, the one in the press, but there's also the environmental dystopia, which we can do something about. Everybody can do something about it. And it's so horrible to look at it, but I think to fix a problem, you have to look at it, and that requires courage and a strong stomach at times. And like toddlers or little children, if they break something, they say it wasn't me, because they've already dissociated from the them that did it. And I think as a society we've been like that. Yeah. We haven't trashed the environment, it was the generation before, it wasn't our fault. Well, it's, the milk is on the ground, the glass is smashed, and you're standing in front of it. Yeah. Is where we're at right now. So you're either going to go, it wasn't me, or you're going to go, oh, I'm going to clear it up. And that is, I'm making it sound small, but if each of us do something, that's an enormous thing that we're doing. And committing to it personally can be a very, very small thing. But you feel empowered as soon as you do one thing. And so that is a very hopeful, real action.
Yeah.
In the face of all the, the macro horrors that we have to withstand, we can take pleasure in things. Taking joy is a way of fighting dystopia and supporting the humanities and being in community and having festivals. And these are not trivial things at all. They are empowering to the human spirit and to the soul and strengthen us. Certainly me, I think all of us on the panel, and probably everyone in the room who's at a literary festival, because you want to be together. And can you not hear? You can't hear. Is that better? Anyway, I'll hand over and tell me if you can't hear next time.
So there's two lines I'd like to pick up here. One is that I would say I'm hard-pressed in this moment to think of a single dystopian work that did not include, even if it wasn't the focus, an ecological theme. That almost every single vision of like a dystopian future includes some sort of environmental crisis aspect of it, even if that's not necessarily the focus of the book. Food is scarce, drinkable water is scarce, being able to breathe freely is scarce, and often these are background notes in things, but they feel very pressing and is obviously a concern of yours in your writing, and maybe you want to talk about that a little bit more?
I've just read a really brilliant novel by a Swedish writer called Jens Liljestrand, and it's called Even If Everything Ends, and it's told in 4 voices. It's in the near future or the now of Sweden, and there's one quote that I don't even have to look at because it struck me so forcibly, and he says, don't ask what nature will do to us in an environmental crisis, ask what we will do to each other. Because when you get down to survival, everyone is not who they think. And this book is, what I love about it is you've got these wildfires wrecking the country, and it's less important who started it as to how people try and cling to their regular life, their affairs, their greed, their addictions in the face of trying to stay alive. And that's the brilliance of this book, that, if this building was suddenly on fire, you would try and get your handbag or keep your shoes on.
Yeah.
No book spoke to me more when I was a teenager than Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune. Yeah. And you may have read the book or you may have seen the excellent movies that Denis Villeneuve has produced. It's about Arrakis, the desert planet where there's no water. And they have to wear still suits, recycle their own body water fluids in order to survive. And again, for me, it was totally relatable because I live in Karachi and what's right outside our door is a desert. One of the biggest deserts, the Thar Desert, Rajasthan next door in India. And I grew up in phase 5 when they had just reclaimed it from the sea, and there was nothing but just some houses and some dirt. It looked like what the very far reaches of phase 8 look like now. So I grew up looking at an environment that was very dusty and lacking in water, and then being the daughter of farmers as I am, there was always the fear, what if there's no water? What's going to happen if there's no water? What if there's a drought this year? What if there is a flood this year? What if India doesn't give us enough water from next door? So again, and Dune in itself was inspired by the Arab world and the deserts of the Red Quarter, the Empty Quarter, and the so on and so forth. So when you grow up in a country that is always lacking in water, always lacking in natural resources, not because we don't have them, but because of the machinations of politics and the people around us and the greed and the late-stage capitalism, I think that becomes, it's a backdrop, it's also its own character. I think we're talking about climate change all the time politically, we're talking about it scientifically, but when we look at it in the literary tradition, it becomes its own character. It has its own voice and it has things to say, which matches up with the animist religions of our northern areas, Gilgit-Baltistan, who, before they became largely Ismaili, they had their own beliefs, not pagan beliefs, these are animist beliefs, where every object has a soul. Glaciers get married, fairies live in trees, rivers talk, so on and so forth. It's so easy to tap into that tradition to then make a comment about what we are doing to our earth today. And of course, the fun part of dystopia is imagining what it's going to do back to us.
Yeah. There is a note of hope that some nations like Ecuador and the Pacific Island nations are giving rivers rights. I think New Zealand has given rivers rights.
Like
So
actual rights,
actual personhood.
political rights.
Yeah, actual legal personhood. The Pacific Island nations have conferred personhood on whales, which they consider their cultural family, their ancestral, spiritual family. And I believe in Ecuador there are personhood rights being granted to rivers as well.
And how fantastic that we have already done that to the Indus through our poetry, through our indigenous writing and through our indigenous literary traditions. We already think of the Indus River as being alive, as being animated.
Poets have always done that.
Yep.
Ryan, you could probably say more.
As a poet.
No, I probably can't.
Sorry, I shouldn't have thrown it.
No, I mean, the one of the sort of organizing principles of a modern society was your city needs to be on or near a river or it can't function. I've always been fascinated by that. Growing up in New York, we have the Hudson and the East River, which were severely damaged in the 80s by GE, but then has since been cleaned up and is a space where you can go for water activities now. So I know we're not, but I think this is a good point to say that, like, we haven't ruined everything yet.
Yeah.
Yet. And I hope through panels like this and discussions like this that we can sort of maybe use fewer plastic water bottles, and small things like that. I have one, it's in my room. I forgot it.
So I see that I have some students in the audience. Hello, students. One of the things I just spoke to them about a couple weeks ago is this quote we teach in our writing class, that art is the lie that tells the truth, right? There's lots of different writers who have said this multiple times, but this one is the one that always has spoken to me, that is what we're kind of discussing. And I wanted to point this over to Ryan again as a fellow academic and also as a poet who, like, the medium of poetry is different than the medium of prose, where we engage with the imaginary, and that prose has a very different language that that poetry has a very different language that we use to communicate ideas. And I wanted to kind of talk about that, or maybe see if you have any thoughts on, like, what does poetry bring us, what does art bring us in this conversation?
Yeah. Conveniently, I'm reading a collection of poetry by Franny Choi called The World Keeps On Ending and the World Goes On. And in it, she's got a poem. This is pure coincidence, I promise. She's got a poem that's called Dystopia. And it's a poem that uses anaphora, which is the repetition of the beginning of a line or phrase. Each line starts dystopia of, and then goes from the, one of the lines is the dystopia of lost sock, all the way to the dystopia of global pandemic. So we use this big word dystopia, but everything can be a dystopia if you're in the wrong headspace. And I think most of the poetry that I enjoy doesn't tend towards that sort of narrative function, but just by, but it's the repetition of dystopia, 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 it becomes absolutely banal, and the most familiar things become a dystopia. And I think that's one of the powers of poetry, is to defamiliarize the familiar and sort of remind you of how uncomfortable your life is.
And poetry tends to break with reality in very different ways, right? Like time functions different in poetry than it may do in our prose, even though in prose, obviously, we play with time as well. But there seems to be this flex that maybe we need, right? We need to talk about these very large, looming ideas.
Yeah. So in my current major works in world literature class, I'm using sort of time travel as the main thematic of the course. So we're reading Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and I was struck immediately upon reading it. A lot of the times when you read about dystopia or the future, the author sets it sort of somewhere between like 20 years in the future, something like that, where it's not too far away. H.G. Wells set his book 800,000 years in the future. The year is 800,000, 2040. And it doesn't end well for us, without spoiling the book. But speaking of the seen and the unseen dystopia, Wells has it set up where society has become bifurcated, and there's a group that's called the Morlocks, and they literally live underground, and apparently are cannibals and eat the overworlders. So, and that was 1895. I mean, people have been telling us things are going wrong for a very long time. And again, just hoping that more people listen.
In the Time Machine, there are the Morlocks, and then is it the Eloi, who are the beautiful people that they predate upon, which is like our celebrity culture, and we get some kind of satisfaction from a shameful, grim identity that we can so easily be triggered into, and then tear down what we consider to be out of reach, yet we still need to look at, to believe it's possible, which brings me back again to my own personal algorithm of social media and freedom and kindness.
Yeah. Do you have anything there?
I'm sleeping with my eyes open. I just flew in from the U.S. 2 days ago, so I'm extremely jet lagged. And I don't exactly know where to pick up this thread from. But
what would make you feel empowered to write again?
What would it take?
Yeah. What conditions?
Not teaching.
Okay. So rest.
No, space and time.
Space and time.
Which are interestingly, and you're talking about the actual time travel and the actual concept of being able to manipulate these elements, but I think that it mirrors what we do as dystopian writers, because I'm thinking so many times you're writing this kind of a novel, you have to go back, you have to go forward, you have to be able to shine a light on the contrast between what's happening in your book's present, the actual world present, what you think is going to happen in your book's future, and what you think is going to happen in the world's future. I'm not going to talk about the past because it is obviously, it's dystopia, so it's future. But we also do have to, I guess, examine what's been going on in the past as well. So we, as dystopian writers, are manipulators of time. We're manipulators of space ourselves. And that gets really exhausting.
Talking about going back in time, does anyone know the work of Olivia Butler?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Octavia.
Octavia
Yeah.
Butler. I've
You
sitting
jet lag
next to
too?
someone with jet lag, I'm catching it. So Kindred, does anyone know that
Amazing
book?
book.
Yeah, incredible book.
Phenomenal
Where
book.
she, for those who don't know it, a black woman a contemporary black woman time slips back into a time of slavery and keeps kind of toggling between these two time frames, and it's absolutely terrifying because she doesn't know when she's going to wake up in the dystopia.
Right.
Yeah. There's a point in the novel where she has a go bag strapped to her at every given moment. That's because she doesn't know and she can't control when she time travels. But that bag is stuffed with things like antibiotics, right? And like food. And they like go to like an antique shop and find antique money so that at any time she's prepared for that slip. And then I'm going to spoil the ending. You should read the book; it's phenomenal. One of the last scenes in the book, she finally comes back to the future for the first time, but her arm is stuck in the wall of her house. So she basically phases back into the present, but she's not fully there, and her arm has to be amputated. And I remember the first time I read it and not understanding it intellectually, but feeling it in my belly. And then the amount of power that has to the conversation we're talking about. Like, we are not divorced from the past, right? We owe everything to what came before us, even if we are not responsible for it, right? It is here now, where our arm is stuck in the past, and we cannot separate ourselves from it.
I want to just say that, can you imagine how weird you have to be as a person, as a writer, to be able to imagine these kinds of things?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain amount of just, you can still be, I think, somewhat normal and write a contemporary romance or, whatever that kind of thing. But when you're doing dystopia, science fiction, future, you're definitely really out there.
Yeah.
But you can live in a very boring, conventional way and wear Gap clothes and do really...
You're in disguise, though.
Yeah.
You're disguised as a normal person.
You support your functional life by being normal and conservative.
Yeah.
So that you can be free and wild in the
In
privacy
your
of
head.
your own mind.
Yeah, and that we go back to that. We go back to that concept of freedom of speech. There's freedom of the mind.
Yeah.
Which is what I think I had growing up in Pakistan. I didn't have freedom of movement, being a girl and then being a woman in this country, but nobody could take away that freedom I had in my mind, to think anything, to write in my head anything, to imagine, to daydream. And
we still have that.
we always have that.
We have that right
we'll
now in
always
this
have
room.
that, and AI will not take that from us.
Well, it makes you a smooth-brained. It just smooths all your folds
Yeah,
out.
so students, if you use ChatGPT too much, be careful, because your brain, you'll actually become dumber.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
That is not hyperbole. That is like academic studies.
Live
scientific.
Live with the anxiety of
Scientifically
thinking.
proven
Yeah.
that your cognitive decline your cognitive abilities will decline the more you use ChatGPT, AI, the more you let it think for you.
Yeah.
So I always tell my students, if you came here to be dumb, then don't do it.
Yeah. I know we're going to have good questions, so I want to make sure I leave ample time for that, but I want to hit the panel with one final question. I'm going to start with Ryan and move the way back. Is there room for hope in dystopia?
Yes, is my very short answer, but I'll expand on it. I think Bina just said something very scary to me, which is that we will always have freedom of mind. Again, if we look at 1984 and the idea of thought crime, that's, to me, one of the scariest things that fiction has introduced, that you're no longer just in trouble for your actions, but you can get in trouble for having wrong thoughts. Mm-hmm. So it's scary to me, again, in that way that dystopic fiction so often is, I don't want to say a prediction of the future, but maybe a guess at the future. So
That's what we have religion for, right?
I have no comment on that question whatsoever.
No comment.
But to go back to Octavia Butler, her book, series of books. The first one is The Parable of the Sower. Mm-hmm. I think it's not a trilogy. I think it's a duology.
Trilogy.
Is it a trilogy?
Yeah.
Her book ultimately finds hope in, an expression of a new religion that is created to help move these survivors forward, and it's a useful fiction in that universe to help people come together, to help them persevere. And again, as Laline was saying, we're all here in this room because we care about literature, we care about each other to some extent, and we want that sense of community. So I think as long as we can connect with another human being as a human being, there is room for hope.
Yeah. Bina? Because I feel like there's hope in Monster War. I think that is. I read it as full of hope.
Yeah, the good guys win.
Yeah.
But now in the third book, I don't know. So hope is slippery. Hope and optimism are slippery things. And yet, I would not have picked up a pen if I didn't have hope. And also, I can be very cynical and very depressing, and depressed myself. And so, along with hope, there's sort of, I forgot the question, I'm sorry.
Is there room for hope in dystopia?
Yes.
Okay, you want me to say yes? I'll say yes. I'll say yes.
I
Yes.
need you
Yes.
to.
No, I'm trying to actually arrive at the answer, but my brain has just decided that it's 5 in the morning, and I just.
I will tell you something that I
Well,
hope.
how dystopian is jet lag, by the way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am living in my own dystopia right now, and you can see the effects of it on me. I'm hopeless, but in 2 weeks I'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I would like to share something which anyone can Google if they want, and it's an initiative that I've recently, well, it's a couple of years ago, become involved in, called the Oxford Ministry for the Future. And I'm a fellow at my college there, Hertford College, which is its home. And it is a termly interdisciplinary gathering of economists and scientists, but it always leads with the humanities. And it's funded by the business schools, surprise, surprise, but good for them. And it always opens with a writer talking about a particular theme. And does anyone know the book, The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson?
Yep.
Which I highly recommend because it is a textbook, or almost literally a textbook that's read around the world by governments and policymakers. Because in this future world, which is ravaged by all sorts of omni-crises, there is a devastating heat wave in India which triggers global collapse. And so the Ministry for the Future is set up as a global organization which will use every single tool at the disposal of the ingenuity of humanity to put the brakes on and save the world, essentially. So it's fun. I learned an incredible amount, and what has happened is Kim Stanley Robinson has given his blessing to Oxford University, bringing together all sorts of brilliant people who are not prepared to just be siloed and want to work together and talk about relationships that can be made to address various things with a high level of skill, competence, brilliance, ingenuity. And the Oxford Ministry for the Future is now going out to the University of Uppsala in Sweden in April, and it's going to the University of Vienna later this year. And if there's anyone from an institution in Karachi that wants to put their hand up to invite it, have a Google and get involved, because it is a global network that opens its arms to anyone who wants to come to the public events, and is a trove of information and resources. And it's one of the most hopeful actions, collective actions, that is now getting bigger and bigger that I have witnessed, and that really does give me the will to go on, to be involved in that.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to questions from the audience. We have.
Can you wake me up if there's a question?
Sure, absolutely. I'll keep you on to it. We have one in the back, one over here. Can someone bring them a microphone so that, or shout really, really loud?
No, they need the microphone for the recording.
Oh yeah, then you definitely need the microphone. Thank you.
Hi. Basically, my question is related with the from writers and authors. There are definitely many authors and writers who wrote about the system of democracy, system of democratic system in the world. In the past, and of course today and the future, there will be many more of they are writing about democracy. But as you've seen this, the dystopian, the totalitarian rule is, emerging. And if you getting example of Chinese system is some sort of you can say that it's a totalitarian. Some people will say that it's a dystopian. They are showing to the world the success stories. Now, I'm asking that so much plenty of, books written on democracy, democratic system. And I of course quote the senator from Vermont, the Bernie senator. He said about the oligarchy, that even the United States is also going towards an oligarchy system. The totalitarian, again, they are going towards that side. So why it is a failing, the democracy system is failing, even the authors are writing down, but the world is going towards dystopian or the totalitarian. Why? What is the reason behind that?
Do you mind if I punt this as my answer first? I'm not here to defend democracy and not defend democracy, but you cannot hold up China as an example of a positive institution when they control what their citizens can and cannot say upon pain of death, period. There is no way to fairly judge that system of whether or not it works when the only information that comes out of that system is information that is completely guarded by the government, which is part of what we were just talking about up here. If you have no freedom of thought, if you have no freedom of expression, then you have no freedom.
I want to add to that China has, I'm sorry, I can't see who asked the question.
He's right there.
Great. So China has some of the most incredible science fiction coming out in modern times. One of those is The Three-Body Problem, which is also a series on Netflix. Chinese writers are dealing with exactly what you're talking about, the clampdown on their freedom of speech. And you have writers like Mo Yan, who won the Nobel, but he's been accused of being too sympathetic to the Chinese government when it has been suppressing and having problems with so many other writers. The feminist movement in China is extremely suppressed. So although this tells you that there are problems within even perfect-looking societies. And I think what you're talking about speaks so well to the idea of what is utopia, what is dystopia. So I think sometimes when there's a huge effort to control the image of a country, that's like presenting it as a utopia. There's a lot of politics in why they do that as well, to say that, well, our system is superior to the United States system, or it's superior to the Western system, so on and so forth. The science fiction writers actually deal with that, and they do deal with it in science fiction because that's the only way to get it past censorship. So I would say that you're asking why has it not made a difference? Everything that we're writing, everything that we're talking about, why are things still getting worse and worse? And that's a great question, and probably because people don't read enough.
Yeah.
The less you read, the worse the world will become. It's simple.
So it's education.
It's reading. Because you can read whether or not, I mean, obviously literacy, but reading is the thing that expands your mind, helps you get empathy, helps you develop your tolerance, so on and so forth. You can travel just by reading a book. So I think the actual act of reading is the revolutionary one, and it will always be.
Yeah. And just one last quick note.
No, who's got the? Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Do you mind
I was looking at the audience, like, who's talking?
The other thing I would add to that is the reason democracy seems to be failing is because so often people are voting against their own interests, and that goes back to education and goes back to imagining the self and the other more complexly. Hopefully we haven't seen the end of democracy, but hopefully it will continue to evolve with a more educated population.
Yeah, please, thank you.
So Bina just said something about China and science fiction coming out of China. And dystopian literature that came out of the Soviet Union, Zamyatin's
The Iron
We.
Bloc.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Zamyatin's We is the precursor to Brave New World in 1984, which the West does not like to acknowledge, but it is. Great dystopian literature came out of the USSR and then post USSR. I can give a list later to anybody who wants it, but I won't take more time. But what you said about that reminded me of satire as a way of getting through. I just realized it, like literally when you said that satire and science fiction or dystopian literature has something in common. It tells the truth, it's art telling the truth, but in a way that'll circumvent the censors. So in Ziaul Haq's time, we had some of the best comedy ever. And new generations just do not know how brilliant A Case of Exploding Mangoes is, because unless you grew up in that time. Because of, well, that's just a personal opinion, you may not like it, but I'm just saying the idea, it's satirizing that 50-50, all of those Gupshup, Shoaib Hashmi, Salima Hashmi, all of these people. And then you look at all of this literature coming out of the Soviet Union, and then even post-Soviet Union, and talking about, in general, ecology, because at that time there was a great danger of a nuclear holocaust and what will happen to people and the earth. And so you have things like The Slinks by Tatiana Tolstaya, and the recent one, Metro 2033, by Dmitry. So there are many, many books to be read and lessons to be learned, but I think that the policy makers don't read them. And like Ryan said, it doesn't work because people vote against their interests. And we are not reading the first chapter of the first volume of the Gulag Archipelago.
I just want to respond real fast to that before we go to the next question, which is that Muhammad Hanif said, how did you dare to write Exploding Mangoes? And he said, well, because they won't read it. Nobody will read it, so I'm okay. And he's being satirical, cynical in that response. But it shows you the cat and mouse game that you have to play to preserve your freedom of speech. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that the similarity of satire and dystopian literature is that it's exaggeration. Everything is based on exaggeration of to a comic length or exaggeration to a catastrophic length. So they are two sides of the same coin. And that's very perceptive. Please go ahead.
So my question is related to your last question. Is there hope in dystopia? And what you said, that there's a whole ministry forming and the brightest minds in the world are getting together to have a solution. My question is, at one point I would have been hopeful, but Europe kowtows to the US, whose mantra is, among other things, drill baby drill. In that scenario, what would your minds do? Like, you see dystopia, I'm not trying to be controversial, but you see dystopia, for example, in Gaza. You see dystopia elsewhere in the world. You see Europe very upset about Greenland, but damn care about Venezuela. So in that kind of world, where the rules, but they've openly said the rules are not for the strong, only for the weak. Where would your ministry stand, and what hope can it actually give to the world that it can improve it?
The thing, I'm very, very happy to hear you. Very happy to hear your question. Thank you. That's very brave of you to stand up and say it. I really appreciate it. The Oxford Ministry for the Future is a lay gathering of people who care, who are coming together because no one's doing anything. The cavalry isn't coming. No one is coming to save us but us. So if you can join forces with people you trust and believe in, and people are willing to put themselves out there and stand up in public like you've just done and say the word Gaza, for which I really applaud you, and there are a few people in this festival who have dared to utter the word genocide. And many times that word is not used, and it's not used by the BBC very often. And there is a dumbing down of our collective intelligence to serve the status quo. And we've just discussed how the status quo is the rise of totalitarianism. So I am just one person. I am just a writer. I would like this to be a lightsaber. I try, at my best, I hope that this can be a lightsaber, but all I can do is what I can do, and all you can do is be here and stand up and have the courage, and I really applaud you for that. Yes, yes, you can. If you Google it, you will be able to look at the links to the live replay, and there is always a public event which is free, which anyone can come to. There's a limited seating capacity, but you can certainly become part of this initiative, and you can stay part of it, and you can benefit from the links and the connections. So please, everybody that is interested, do Google it. And the next one is on the 10th of March, and it's about AI. And it will be interesting. Yeah, so, just hang on to one tiny bit of driftwood and take some oxygen from it.
Yeah,
Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, my question's a bit more, less intense. Everything we've read and watched so far, the dystopia is usually pretty smart. I didn't expect it to be this stupid. Like, we were expecting the Star Wars originals, but we're getting the prequels. And how do we deal with that in this Jar Jar world? It's a bit dumb.
Oh, Gen Z, we love you so much.
I mean, I think that we told, you have to read, right? You're correct. These are not super geniuses who are out there suppressing us. They're doing it through brute force and basically force of will. And money. Oh yeah, we cannot discount the economic factor of this. But I'm going to do my educator hat. They want you dumb, they want you complacent, and they want you not to think. And the they is a ubiquitous they. There's not a person with a crown sitting somewhere being and I would like that person to be stupid. But there's a system of things that happen that you this is actually tied into what you're saying. You personally have your own dystopian fight to fight. And that is internal, that is with yourself, that's in resistance to messages that are harmful, that is in loving each other, that is in being kind to each other, that is in recognizing the humanity in each other, and cultivating yourself so that you can cultivate the bigger fight.
Find joy.
Yeah. I think we have time for exactly one question. Do we have time? Okay. Go ahead.
Hi. Just so you guys can see me, I'll stand. Okay. Hi, great conversation today. So my question is more literary. I want to take the dystopia into literature and words. As writers, there's two kinds of dystopias. It's one where you lose control, and it's very doomsday scenario. It's very apocalyptic. And there's one where there's a sense of hope at the end. Given the kind of world we live in, as a writer, when you write characters, what do you lean towards more? Or what do you think resonates more? With agency to control and give hope, or a jolt of reality that we're actually at the end of the tether, we're at the apocalyptic end. That's something that I struggle with when I write myself. So that's something that I'm curious about. Thank you.
Okay. I really do genuinely believe in the fundamental goodness of most people, and the fact that we have far more in common, despite appearances, than we go through our day thinking. And there can be little bits of beautiful evidence that prove this. Flowers left in a hotel room by somebody who you just say hello to in the corridor, who points out that they've done something nice for you as well, which makes my day, gives me hope, makes me humble. And has anyone heard of the reticular activating system, which is what the classic example is if you're about to buy a red car, you start seeing red cars everywhere. Or if you're pregnant, suddenly the world is full of pregnant women. If you train yourself not to ignore the problems, but to look for the good, you will find it, and that will nourish you. That is the protein that our soul needs. And when you start to see it, it will give you not hope, but empowerment, which is far better than hope. So I am on the side of optimism because it's a choice I can make. So why would I choose the other one?
If the panel's okay, I feel like there's an excellent note to end on. All right, thank you all for coming. Thank you for the incredible panel and this wonderful conversation. We'll see you guys around the festival.
Yeah, you did. Once again.
I was watching.
Nini, brilliant. You were brilliant. You're always a great contributor.
Here.